Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to Who Knew? Today, resident Ann Archer will interview resident Lucie Lee Cruz. Lucie will talk about growing up on the river, her family, working in school years, her summer in Alaska, and coming together with glass, quilts, and flowers here at Westminster Canterbury. And she also has a lot of pictures to share with us today, so we're in for a real treat. We're airing today's program live on TV 970, but of course we have our wonderful audience too, and we'd be delighted to take questions after the interview. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Ann and Lucie.
Lucie Lee, we're going to talk about your journey from the river, or the river as we said in Michigan, via many trips to Alaska, and finally culminating in your creative flourishing here at Westminster Canterbury. Let's start with your summers at the river.
All right, thank you, Anne. So in 1946, when I was 6 years old, we need the first picture up there, my parents bought a lot on the Rappahannock River. It was a 100-foot waterfront. It was in the woods. Our next door neighbors bought the lot next to us. And I think I remember going down there that year, and we chopped honeysuckle and cleared the land. And then the next year, when I was 7, we got our houses. So everything we had was World War II surplus. So the truck came with 2 houses on it, and they put the house up. They put 4 cinder block. They set the house on it. They put up the walls and the roof. Mother arranged the furniture. Furniture came from the ladies at the Bridge Club and on the side of the road. We were not too embarrassed to get whatever you need in 1947. And then after Mother put all the furniture in there, then my father built the walls around the furniture. Oh. So we had 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and in the corner of the living room was the bathroom. And I'm told by a friend that it had a shower curtain around it. So the name of the cabin was Leftovers. The person that sold us the property was responsible for the road. So at least the last 2 miles of the road going in was 2 ruts. And he may or may not have maintained it. And so we would get down there and get stuck. And this is his truck. He called it Betsy Ross. So when we didn't show up, I don't know how he knew we were stuck, but he always came out with Betsy Ross and pulled us out of the mud hole, took us down to the cottage. And I'll have to say it took us forever to get there because 360 was 2-lane. My father believed in supporting locals, so we had to stop on the way at Miss Ware's to get eggs, and at Miss Colley's to get vegetables, and at Mr. Rush's to get canned goods. And forgotten who the other person was, but we had an ice box, so we had to stop for ice. So it was a very, very long trip, and I was sort of little. So I tell these stories about the river, and I think I used to feel like I made them up, and then I found these old pictures. So we had a skunk that came to visit. The Kellers, the man who sold us the property, they had like a pet door in their kitchen, and Skunky would come in every night and have a little midnight snack, and then he would come down the road and stop at our house, and he would eat out of our hands. And we had a visitor one time, if you remember, the old Brownie camera with the big flash on it. And he was like, I've got to have a picture of this. And it's like 10 people tackled him before he could do it. We don't need to set off a wild skunk with flash bulbs. Then we had a boat. I remember cleaning out sea rations and rotten life jackets out of that. That's more Navy surplus. And I asked my son, I said, so could it have been a PT boat? And he said, well, how long was it? And I said, it was 26 feet. And he said, well, you know, torpedoes are longer than that, so I doubt that's what it was. And we had so many adventures, but this is the greatest one, is the hollow tree. So on the left is my brother. He has climbed up the tree. And this was like a all-day trip in a rowboat to find this place. But my brother climbed up the top of the tree and came down through the inside of it. And on the right-hand side is our friend again, Paul, who is down at the bottom waiting for him to come out. So, growing up, we had so many misadventures, and I think the first one was going fishing with our next door neighbors. We went out at night. I don't know why we went at night. And we got about in the middle of the river, I guess, and ran out of gas. And they had a gas can, and they were going to fill the gas tank up. And some brilliant person was holding a kerosene lantern. And I remember somebody saying, look out, there's a wave. And the boat just went up in flames. Ooh. And we had a bushel basket of crabs. So my father dumped the crabs out, grabbed the basket, and washed the fire off of the boat. So our mothers were on the shore. They couldn't see anything but the fire. And we had enough gas in the tank to be able to pull away. And so we know we're fine. But all they could see was the fire burning down. As far as they knew, we were all goners. And my friend and I climbed up on top of the cabin. And what I remember being terrified about was not the fire, but all the loose blue crabs in the bottom of the boat. And my father said, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And he said that to me all my life. So there's the river. So then, you would wonder why I wanted to go to Alaska.
Well,
so
now, have we left the river?
We've left the river. I'm just thinking.
All right, then we're going to skip briefly over such minor things as school, college, marriage, and 3 witty and remarkable children.
Yes.
At which point you came back to Richmond and were divorced at that point and looking for a new career, which you found, and then you discovered Alaska.
I did. And you would wonder, I mean, like, I've been at this little cabin in the woods on the river with all these crazy adventures, and I was like 7, 8, and 9 years old at the time. And so, of course, I would. So, if we could see Wrangell, Alaska. On the top is the whole town. That's it. On the bottom, from the water, you can see it's just nestled down there on the water. And if you see a little strip, kind of a white strip across the top of the island, that's the airport. So I had been to Alaska once with my friends Marion Chenault and Peggy Bothwell, and just fell in love with the place. And my cousin, a couple of years later, called, and her daughter was working up there as a youth minister with the Presbyterian Church. And my cousin wanted to know if I would go up there with her to visit her daughter. I was packed, ready. And while I was there, we took these excursions, and they're fairly expensive, like $300 to do much of anything. And there was this young woman with us every time we went out. I said, how do you get to go on these trips? And she said, I work for these people. Summer job. I said, so are you coming back next summer? She said, no. I said, well, who's your boss? Because I want your job. So
This is a characteristic of your personality, I do believe.
how do I do that? And so before I tell you about my job, I have to sort of set the stage for Alaska. It is general numbers. If you laid it over the lower U.S., it would stretch from D.C. to El Paso. It has approximately 600,000 people. Half of them live in Anchorage. So you've got 300,000 people spread over the rest of that territory. And so needless to say, where I went was Wrangell, population 2,000. I would say the town was 2 miles square, maybe. It was a temperate rainforest, so it rained the whole time I was there. When it wasn't raining and you saw blue sky, they called it cloud failure. It was 55 degrees and raining, midsummer. I never got warm the whole time I was there. They had a school, a library, a post office, a hospital, the YWCA, and 9 churches.
Ah, wow.
And the closest town to us was in Petersburg. Petersburg was 3 hours by ferry, 2 hours by jet boat, 25 minutes by Alaska Airlines. So it was remote. There was no, they called it the Rock. We were just there. So this is where I worked. My job was to sell these charters. And their customers came, well, let me tell you, this was at what they call the summer dock. And when the ferry came in or the cruise ships came in, the town would come out with to welcome everybody and sell stuff. And so they had the shady ladies and the children who sold garnets, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, and the Forest Service. And so it's set up kind of like a fair. And so this is where our customers came from. This is a Alaska Marine Highway ferry. This is public transportation. So if you go to Alaska, this is what you want to do, because this is how they really live. So most of our customers came off the ferry. We had a few cruise ships. The cruise ships really kind of rule things, so people in Wrangell weren't real crazy about having, they would tell you what you had to buy and sell, and they would dictate what the tours were going to be, and you weren't allowed to, if you didn't have a contract with them, then you could not charter with their customers. So we loved the ferry. And so people, that's where most of our people came from. And I do want to tell you. So I'll tell you who our providers were first. So the school bus. This was my boss, Marie, and she was a naturalist, and she would drive down to the dock where the ferry came in, and load people up and take them out the road, which was, I guess, maybe 10 miles out. And she did a walk in the forest. It was absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. Climbed the mountain, and there was a deck up there, so that was her primary. Another person we chartered was Sunrise Aviation. There was Mark, who did big game hunting and photography tours. This is recognize some of those people.
They look as if they're having a good time.
Yes, they are. This is Breakaway Adventures, which we did most of our tours with, and he had a jet boat, and Breakaway went everywhere. So this is Marion Chenault and Peggy Bothwell, and we are up at Shakes Lake. We go up to that lake, and there's a beautiful glacier there, and icebergs floating in the lake, and he gave people Santa hats so they could have their picture taken and have Christmas cards made when they got home. So we went on fabulous trips with him. He would take us to Annan, which is where the bears are. So when the salmon came in, you could go up there and watch the bears. We went up the Wrangles on the Stickian River. And we would go up the Stickian into Canada to Telegraph Creek, which was an old Hudson's Bay trading company, and it was a ghost town. But they did have a hotel, if you want to call it that, up there. So that was a frequent trip. One of the other things that we did was transport people. In the next picture, that's the jet boat, and that is the Stickian, and we would transport people and their kayaks, campers, up the river as far up as they wanted to go, and they would camp and kayak back home. And there was one of my favorite customers. He said he wanted to rent a kayak, and I said, well, they'll be right out in the harbor where we are, and you can go down there and pick it up. And he said, no, that's not what I want. I want to go on the Stickian River. And I said, well, then I will arrange a charter for you to get your kayak taken up the river, and you can come back. And he said, that's not what I want to do either. And it was kind of like, he was really getting annoyed with me, and sort of like, well, I just don't know why you won't sell me what I want. And I said, because the Stickian River is the fastest free-flowing river in North America, and it's coming this way. So you probably don't want to try to kayak up there. So, and actually he did not rent anything. So that was primarily the charters that I would arrange for people. We do have one more place where Breakaway, the Forest Service would build hot tubs out, and so that's probably an hour out of Wrangell, and there were people in there all the time, and usually you can see the beer. There are also guns hanging around. You can't see those, but there were bears and moose frequenting the hot tubs, so you did have to be prepared for that. Okay, so now I can tell you that was my work, that was my job, so I can tell you about getting there.
How many trips did you take to Alaska overall, probably?
7. Yes.
So those were the first two, and
Those are the
then,
first two. Then I took my grandson up on his 16th birthday. We spent 2 weeks up there and traveled from Fairbanks to Wrangell. And my most recent, there were 12 of us that went together, the 4 couples from here and 2 from North Carolina. And then I wanted to go once. I wanted to know what it was like in the winter. So I went up with a friend, and we flew up to Fairbanks and then drove to Chena Hot Springs and North Pole. So I have a picture of us sitting on Santa's lap at North Pole, Alaska. So then I went back a couple of times just to visit.
and it was in Alaska that you started quilting?
Yes. Yes. When we went to Petersburg, I was bored to death in that shack when there was nobody, no customers, no ferries, and you can't walk through because there are no roads, and you can't drive through. And so it was pretty. So I went to one trip to Petersburg. I bought a pattern. I thought maybe I would try making a quilt. I had never done that. So I bought a pattern, so I have a picture of that later. And so,
Yeah, we got the quilt, yeah.
okay, so if we back up to the one after the hot tub, when I got there, it had been 4 time zones away, and I don't know how many hours, and was exhausted. Steve was supposed to meet me at the airport. So I get there, and he's not there. But there was somebody I had met the year before. She said, "Oh, wonderful, you're back in Wrangell. So where are you staying?" I said, "I don't have the slightest idea. Steve was supposed to meet me. He's not here, and that's all I know." So she took me home with her. I went to bed, and she went out, found Steve, and I learned 2 things very quickly. Number one, you never know. Making appointments is useless. Steve was out on search and rescue. Somebody's grandfather didn't come home. And everybody is so helpful, but you just don't count on a lot.
Yeah.
So she found my apartment. It was a little, see, here's the river again. It was a 300 square foot garage apartment, and not particularly well furnished. So friends and neighbors collected furniture. But anyway, my cell phone didn't work. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a TV. I had a computer with no internet. I couldn't get up with my family. And I was so upset about everything. And so I thought, well, I'll go to church. And that was this, I think I got up there on Wednesday. I went to church on Sunday. It was Mother's Day. And Father Mike read for his sermon a little story called "Mama, Do You Love Me?" And I just sat there and cried and cried and cried.
Oh.
It was the sweetest little story. So then I went, the next day, I went on Monday, I went to the grocery store, Bob's Grocery, there was nothing there. Then I went to the hardware, I wanted all these things for my little apartment, there was nothing there. But everybody said, well, it'll be here on Tuesday. And I was like, how do they know everything's going to be here on Tuesday? Well, that's how. It all comes in on a container ship. So it comes in every Tuesday. You can see a truck on there, cars, groceries, you name it. Everything came in that way. So besides being able to do all the charter trips, I also was so blessed to be invited by local people to do local things that tourists don't get to do. So we went to Petersburg for Viking Days. It's kind of like the Oyster Festival, I guess. That was hysterical. Everybody was walking around in Viking clothes, the horns and the breastplates. And that was where I bought the quilt pattern. One friend asked me if I'd like to go to the movie. Well, that's great, and one here. We got on the ferry in the afternoon, spent the night on the ferry, got to Ketchikan in the morning, went to the movie that afternoon, spent the night in a hotel, and got the ferry back. So 3 days to go to a movie.
Do you remember what the movie was?
No, I knew you were going to ask me that. It's like, I don't remember. I hope it was a good one. Did not remember. One of the camping trips I took, I did not realize this was going on, but Steve, who didn't meet me at the airport, when I finally met up with him, he said, "So you're a social worker. Do you work with teenagers?" And I said, "No, I don't. No, that's not my thing." And he said, "Have you ever seen a teenager in your office?" And I said, "Yes, I have." And he said, "Well, then up here, you're an expert." And we have a program called Crossings that comes through the Mental Health Center. And it's for boys, the kids that are in trouble. They go out. It's kind of like Outward Bound. Mm-hmm. They take them out in the wilderness and camp and survival techniques and things like that. And they wanted to start one for girls. And I did not know, but we went on the boat up the river, 4 hours maybe. That's where the Crossings camp was. And it turned out it was a job interview. They wanted to know if I would come back the next summer and do the girls. No. I can't see me doing. I was 61 at the time. I could hardly see myself coming back the next year and
starting a program
in the forest. That was couldn't do that. So one of the things is they're so proud about is they love America, and they love the 4th of July. That is just a huge celebration. So in the next picture, they have a radio station. And on the radio station, you can, it's volunteers, so if you have CDs or you have your favorite music, you just go up there and you do that for an hour or two or a half a day. Somebody else volunteers to go read the paper. Somebody volunteers to do the news. But they're great things like, so-and-so went to Petersburg to the movie this week. It was really amazing. But I show that because in the next picture is the 4th of July parade. Now, if you remember Bob's grocery store, this is Bob's All-Star Boombox Band, and if you can see, they're all carrying boomboxes. You remember those? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the school did not have a band, and so the radio station played parade music, and you could hear it over their radios. I just love that. So moving on, Marion and Peggy came up to stay with me for a week, and we were invited to go to fish camp. So that's the next. Fish camp, I guess, was, an hour or so up the island, down the island. And families, it's subsistence living. So in the summer, families have to gather all the food they need for the winter. And tourists are not allowed to catch but like one fish. And so this is
it was an honor to be invited on this.
It was really, really special. And so they took us up and dumped us in the woods, gave us a tent, said, found a place you'd like, set up your tent. So yes, the three of us stayed in that little tent. It did rain the whole time. It was cold. And you could hear them. They put out not nets, but trap lines, I think you call it. And every now and then you'd hear somebody yell, "Fish on!" And they'd go out and get the fish and bring them in. At one point, some boat came in, crabbers came in. They said, we've got more crabs than we can handle. We'd like some fish, so they would swap. But they would get as much as they could over that weekend. So we were leaving fish camp and headed back for Wrangell, and all of a sudden it just instantly changed from a fun trip to something very, very serious. The captain got over the radio that some fishermen a boat had capsized. And so we headed for that. Everybody and everything is on duty when it's search and rescue. So the ferry, the airplanes, anybody that was out in a boat, everybody is out looking. So there was a guide who had taken 4 men out. The boat flipped over. The 4 men fell out. With hypothermia, they felt like they were getting hot and took their life jackets off. So they dropped us off. They left me and Peggy on the next island over. There was a houseboat, and there were 2 boys in there. One of the things they do in school, starting I think in the 5th grade, is they learn survival techniques. And so there were 2 young boys, and I think they were 10, had found 2 of these men trying to get to the shore, taken them into this houseboat, taken their clothes off, wrapped them in blankets, got the fire going. They knew exactly what to do with them.
And these were 10-year-old boys or young children.
Knew exactly what to do. So our job was to sit and hug these naked men wrapped in blankets. And they took Marion off. Not sure, she can probably tell you where she went. And they were searching for a third. I think they found the 3rd man. The 4th one they never found.
And the guide?
And the guide was fine. So we had to do a little debriefing in my little garage apartment that night. It was really scary.
Oh.
It was really quite serious.
Yeah.
So I have my quilt.
Number 18?
So I have, okay, so there's the famous quilt. It took quite a bit to get it done, and I finally finished it, and there was a gift shop across the street from me, and she said, "I can sell that for you." And I said, "There's no way." No. And she said, "Well, to make it authentic, it needs buttons." And I said, "And exactly where would you think I am going to find buttons? Because there is not exactly, Joanne's is not there." And so she said, "Well, I'll keep an eye out. I'll try to think of something." Well, meantime, I'm still running my business in Richmond.
Oh, that's right.
And so the counselors are seeing clients, and that's fine. The administrators, if you will, that I worked with, nobody knew I was gone. And so we could negotiate over the phone. So I'm talking on the phone to this man, and while we're talking, Brenda comes running across the street, screaming at the top of her lungs. And she says, "Lucie Lee, Dan and his daughter just kayaked in, and he has caribou buttons." And there was a silence on the phone, and this man says, "Where are you?"
This is someone in Richmond.
Yes.
Where there aren't many caribou.
So, if you will look closely, my quilt does have buttons on it. That was not easy.
Well, I wanted sort of jump ahead from Alaska to your getting here to certain side trips to Antarctica and then Egypt,
Yeah.
which were also among your travels.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to Antarctica. If you ever have a chance, it's quite a trip. But you have to go through Argentina and take a boat from Ushuaia at the bottom of Argentina. The Southern Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean come together, and it's a wild ride. And there were 2 people on this trip. This was their 3rd attempt to cross, so we were really lucky to get there. Our beds had seat belts on them. And I do remember crossing. They said it was really calm. I'm glad it was calm because it was bad. So, but this is my favorite picture. The penguins make trails, and we were admonished if we were absolutely not to walk on a penguin trail, and we were admonished if we even got close to one. So we're walking on a people trail, and look who's with us. Just thought that was so funny. He just had every right to be on my trail. I thought he was so
How
cute.
tall is a penguin?
These were not very big.
Like-
The great big ones, they're like 4 or 5 different kinds. The big ones were not the little ones were, probably like that. And they don't have predators on land, their predators are in water. So they weren't afraid of people. The tours are very careful about how many people got to go there and how many are there at one time. So they were fun.
And now let's segue to the Sphinx.
Oh, well, let me give 2 pictures because I want you to see how gorgeous Antarctica is. Stunning. It is absolutely beautiful. So then, yes, Nan and I had a rare opportunity to go to Egypt. I had a friend whose son-in-law was with the State Department, and our friends were going over to visit the children. Would anybody be interested? And where our hands are up pretty quick, and we had an unbelievable, probably a couple of weeks. It was, but it was 2002, so it was right after the
9/11.
The 9/11. So we were, I guess, because of the State Department and whatnot, we were very well protected. But that was interesting. Okay. So,
Can we bring you to Westminster Canterbury now?
Okay.
And let's see what gardens. Still at the river because you had a house there, next door to the original cabin.
yeah.
Still gardening there and here. And by the way, you were there for quite a long time at the beginning of COVID, as I recall.
I did. I left. I thought I would be gone 2 weeks. I was gone 8 months.
2 weeks, 8 months.
What's the difference?
We were glad to have you back. But still gardening in both places and doing art, making quilts, creating stained glass masterpieces. Show us some of those.
Okay, so these are little baby quilts. After I made the quilt in Alaska, I thought that was kind of fun. Maybe I could figure out babies are good excuses. So I made 2 little baby quilts. So got right many babies, so I've made a lot of more than that. The next one I made for myself, and I have a couple in the works, but they're for Christmas, so I can't show those. So when I moved over here, I'm sure I was with Laurie. I said the only problem I have thinking about moving here is I won't be able to do my stained glass anymore. And she said, why not? I said, it takes space and tools and whatever. And she said, we'll have a place for you, which is so remarkable. I had a little tiny table and Then they wanted to know if I'd teach classes, so the table got bigger. And it has really grown from there. So I'm very blessed. So I didn't ask permission to show these, but I did this for Jan Orgain. And later, this was before she moved, and when she got here, she wanted in her kitchen. She did not tell me that she had an outlet put in the wall and wanted it backlit, and so I went in the wood shop and built a light box, and that's hanging in her kitchen. Okay, we can. I did this. I had saved this cat for the longest time, and so I pulled it out one day, and I was like, I wonder what he's thinking. So that's what that is. Okay. This I did for my son. He's a pilot. And he said, you know, pilots always collect those antique wooden propellers. And he said, I want a glass propeller, and I want it to be patriotic. So that's
there
that.
it is.
I did that for fun. Bears roasting marshmallows in Alaska. I'm sure that's where they are. Did this for someone in Cape Charles. She didn't want to block out the light. It's her bedroom, and she just wanted something that would let light in and had the outdoors. This is friends in Williamsburg. They said they wanted a Nautilus, and this space over there, a mantle, had something that didn't convey when they bought the house. So it's great big space. And I said, I've never done anything that's up against a wall. I don't know how to do that or what to do. Mm-hmm. So it's all really very, very textured, clear glass. And they painted the wall the color that they wanted the background to be. And this is also Cape Charles. She built a house, had a space cut over. She wanted a window the size of her queen-size bed, and she wanted glass in it over the bed. She did not tell me that she was doing that. After the window was in, after the hole had been cut, then she said, by the way, I need a piece of glass. So that's where that one went. This I did for my daughter. She has to have ginkgos everywhere. Did that for her. And this is one I had done a while back that somebody here bought, and did it again a couple of weeks ago for somebody else here. So I think that's all my glass. So this one, you can see the side light. When this lady bought this house, it already had that satellite in it, and she wanted something over the door because it was just clear, so I copied that for her. I was very lucky to be able to find, when they make glass, then they don't make the same, they stop making certain patterns, and so I was very lucky to find something that was close enough you wouldn't know. Made this for Joan Hines' daughter. She was living in Colorado, and I thought that aspen leaves and geodes would be perfect for her.
Nice.
And this one was really fun. She said she's got this fan light over her door, and she said, I just want stained glass in there, and so you can just do a stripe. You can do red and green and blue and yellow. And I was like, that just looks absolutely terrible. And she was going on a trip with girlfriends, so I sent her an email. And I said, I want you, while you're on your trip, I want you and your girlfriends to look at stainedglasspatterns.com and find something. And so this was pretty close to, I designed this after several things she sent me that she said she liked. So, and this I made for myself. And that's at the river. I had been saving that heron pattern for a very long time, and I had a friend who lives in the fan, and we love in the fan to go alley picking. So she called me. She said, I'm in the alley, and I've got a window frame. Would you like to have it? Yes, I would. So that's what that is. And this is another, Jan Organ said that she would like to have a seashell. And that's all my glass.
That's all. My goodness gracious. Well, we have time now for a few questions from the audience. But before that, let's all give Lucie Lee a hand for this wonderful trip she's taken us on.
Jessica has a microphone, so if anybody has any questions, if you want to raise your hand, and she will come over with the microphone. There's got to be some burning questions out there. All right, you covered so much, and
I
you
must
really
have covered the waterfront.
You gave us a lot of history about your time in Alaska. But I'll take this opportunity. I want to know a little bit more about Skunky.
Skunky?
Yes. You just glazed right over that.
I don't know what happened. I guess, he was wild. So I guess I don't know if you can see on his back, it doesn't have a stripe down the middle of the back. It had a V on it. And that's how we knew.
That it was the same one.
It was the same one coming back every night.
Mm. And obviously you all didn't frighten her,
Yeah.
evidently.
Yeah, I can't understand that, but yeah.
Lucie,
Yeah.
when you went to Alaska, took this job, was this a summer job?
It was. I went in May and came back in August. But that's the only time you can play up there, really. The water freezes, and it's a summer job, yes.
All right, we have one more.
Being a relative newbie to this area, I'm wondering which river were you on?
The river.
River.
The Rappahannock. Yeah.
Well, I have one other question. It's not about Skunky. However, you kind of glossed over your children. Will you tell us a little? You have 2 children? You have?
3.
3, okay. Well,
Okay, my daughter's here, Jennifer. She lives in Quinton and is a CPA and has 3 children, and one of her daughters has 3 children.
And they all come to the river at the same time?
I said to her one time, so you're coming, we always like to gather holidays, the 4th or whatever, and I said, you're coming to the river on the 4th, aren't you? And she said, I don't know, it's kind of a long trip, I'm not sure. And I said, well, it's mandatory, because your children are 5th generation here. Mm-hmm. And so you will come here and you will love it.
Yeah.
And
that's
did.
exactly what happened. Yeah.
And I have a son who lives in Williamsburg. He's a pilot and works for Virginia Aviation. And he's got 4 children.
So when everybody comes to the river, it's a real house party.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. We've got a good crowd. And then I had a son who lived in Galveston, and he passed away 4 years ago, I think.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. The pictures were wonderful. It's
Yes.
a lot of talent sitting in that chair right there.
That's for sure.
We've certainly enjoyed seeing it and learning about you, and want to thank you again for your time. And I think Anne wants to talk about the next.
Yes, thank you, Whitney. On November 17th, Bob Kluel will interview this distinguished theologian, historian, pastor, and teacher, Bill Blake, Westminster Canterbury's own Renaissance man. Join us here in the theater or on TV, and that's on the 20th, and that will be the final Who Knew for 2021. but we are already organizing and looking ahead to continuing Who Knew into 2022. So stay with us.
Thank you all.